Why did you cheat on that last test? Why did your friend cheat on his girlfriend? Why are you wearing the shoes that you're wearing right now? Why are your friends vaping in the bathroom? Why are you checking your phone constantly? All of these questions are are questions that psychologists are interested in answering, and we figure out why through research methods. And there are many different ways to explain these behaviors. And today we're going to look and be introduced to 7 perspectives in psychology. So unit 0 is probably the most important unit of all the units, even though it's not even a real unit. That's why it's called unit 0. Unit 0 is basically the fundamentals of psychology, and we're going to have to understand the fundamentals of the research methods in psychology in order to understand anything else. So today we're going to start with what we call 0.1 perspectives in psychology. Okay, there are 7 different ways, 7 different perceptions, 7 different types of psychologists that help us understand human behavior and human thinking. Today we will identify and explain the major perspectives in psychology. We're not going to master them today. I'm just going to introduce these 7 perspectives so that we begin to become familiar with them and we will master them over time. So if you don't get it right away, don't worry, you'll definitely get it by, within a week, within 2 weeks, you'll be a mastermind of the 7 perspectives. Here's the definition of perspectives in psychology if mine wasn't good enough, and here they are. So let's jump in and I'll briefly define and explain the 7 perspectives. It starts with the there's no real order here. Okay, it's not like one after another. It's just 7 different ways. I know there are 8. I'll explain later. There are 7 different ways of explaining human behavior, right? Why is the woman at the grocery store yelling at the cashier, right? Why, just any question related to human behavior. If you're listening to this, you're interested in human behavior, so you probably are familiar with being curious about why people do the things that they do, right? And psychologists are trying to answer those questions. Why do people do the things they do? Why do people think the things that they think, right? And there's a bunch of different ways that we can think about this, right? There's 7 lenses that we can put on and look through to try to understand human behavior. All right, so the first, psychodynamic. The psychodynamic perspective is related to something happening in our brain that we're not aware of. This is called our unconscious mind. And our unconscious mind may have something to do with our childhood experiences. So maybe something bad happened to you as a kid. Maybe you had a tough move, or you went to a new school, or you had a bad breakup, or your parents got divorced, or you're in a car accident. And maybe that thing or those things might still be impacting you today. It might impact the way that you think. It might impact the things that you're afraid of. It might impact the way that you behave and the places you go and the friends that you make and the people that you talk to. All right, this is the psychodynamic perspective is related to maybe something that happened in childhood or a long time ago is now influencing you, even if you don't know that that thing is influencing you today. That's the psychodynamic. And then we've got the behaviorist perspective. Behaviorism is just focused on how people behave. All right, it's not concerned about how people think, it's just how people behave, right? How many students are checking their phones in class? How many students are sleeping in class, right? I can see the student is sleeping, I can see the student is on their phone. I would be a behavioral psychologist. I'm interested in how people behave. Then there's the humanistic approach. This is kind of the optimistic approach. A humanist believes that all people are just doing their best and they're all trying to reach their full potential, and you can do anything if you set your mind to it. That's a humanistic approach. And then we've got our cognitive approach. And this is the opposite of the behaviorist approach. The cognitive approach is only concerned with how we think, right? Why do some people think Donald Trump is good and some people think Donald Trump is bad? What's happening there? Is there a difference in thinking, right? The cognitive approach is interested in how we think, how we solve problems, and how we remember things. And it's a fundamental perspective. It's an entire unit in AP psychology. All right, and then we've got the easiest one to understand, I think. It's the biological approach. The biological approach is concerned with our human biology, our brain chemistry, and how our brain and our brain chemistry can change the way that we think, and therefore it can change the way that we behave and move throughout the world, right? We can change our brain chemistry through the foods that we eat, through vitamins that we take, through drugs that we take, through exercise, through sleep. And all these things change the way that we think and change the way that we behave because it alters our brain chemistry and therefore our biology, the biological perspective. And then we've got the evolutionary perspective, which is kind of the historian in the group. The evolutionary psychologist says 99% of human history was spent living in the wild with all the other animals, and our bodies and brains are designed to be living that life still today. Even though we're not living that life anymore, our brain hasn't caught up. Our brain hasn't fully evolved to sitting in classrooms for 8 hours a day, right? So the evolutionary psychologist still treats the human body and brain like it is just any other animal, and it's curious how our instincts and our animal instincts influence the way that we think and behave. And then we've got the sociocultural approach, and you can probably guess this is related to how society, how your family and friends, and how our culture, whether it be Korean or American or Chinese or etc., influences the way that we think and behave. Obviously, people who grow up in China and people who grow up in Portugal probably speak different languages, might have different religious beliefs, customs, social norms, right? And that's it. Their environment shapes who they become, and your environment has shaped who you are and continues to shape who you are. That's the sociocultural approach. And then these are all wonderful approaches. All seven of them are beautiful and they make sense, and they're great ways of exploring human behavior and cognition. But if we combine them all, that's called the biopsychosocial approach, sometimes called the eclectic approach. It's just all of these perspectives are good. Let's combine them all and look at this person's behavior through the lens of everything combined. That's the biopsychosocial. It's just a combination of all. So these are the seven perspectives plus one, the combination. It's just an intro. These are the definitions and brief explanation. And we're going to do some activities in class, such as the 5 fingers, and we're going to look at some scenarios to try to put these perspectives into practice so that we can better understand them. But that is a brief intro to 0.1, the 7 perspectives in psychology. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.